Welcome to Uncopyable Women in Business. I'm your host, Kay Miller, also known as Muffler Mama. Stay tuned as I, along with my guests, give you marketing, sales, and personal branding strategies that will give you an uncopyable advantage. Today, I'm talking with Danielle Kennedy. Danielle is an actor and an international speaker who's been inducted into the very elite Hall of Fame by the National Speakers Association. Now, as the mom of 5 kids, Danielle started a career in real estate by necessity. After she became a top realtor, she started a successful speaking career. And then once her kids were raised, and by then she'd added 3 more, she gave birth to 1. The others were Brady Bunch style, as she puts it. She said she even got a letter from the Pope. That totally cracks me up. Danielle pursued her lifelong passion for acting and theater, and now has over 50 TV and movie roles to her credit. Now, at the age of 79, and she just informed me that in 3 weeks she'll be 80, she's not done. She appears in the TV series Man on the Inside, starring Ted Danson. Danielle, welcome to the podcast.
It's so good to see you, Kay Miller.
Oh my gosh, it's so good to see you too.
We go way back.
Yeah, we go way back. We met years ago at the National Speakers Association. And at the time, Steve was very involved. My husband, Steve, the orange dude, and just fell in love with you, of course, right from the beginning. And you are phenomenal in front of the camera, no matter whether it's a movie or speech. So I'm honored to have you.
You're so sweet. I was an only child. And always wanted a big family, obviously, as you so beautifully introduced me as the mother of. But being an only child, I think, had a lot to do with my desire for acting, because I had imaginary friends. From the time I was little, I'd have tea parties when I was 4 with little teacups, and I was always talking to myself. And I'll tell you, actors do have to talk to themselves a lot, especially when they're creating a role and backstory.
That makes sense.
Imagination. So I'm lucky because I've always gotten to do what I love. What I really always wanted to do from the beginning, of course, was be an actor. But I think probably the most important thing I ever wanted to do was have a family. And once I had that family, I pursued something that obviously monetarily would make sense, because I had the sound of music kind of idea of what raising a family was like. And I didn't take finances into consideration. Oh, it costs 8 children or 5 children or 6. So I'm glad I put the acting dream on the back burner till after they were all raised. I really am, because it's brutal. A lot of rejection, and we'll talk about all of that. But if you are freer as far as motherhood being at another stage, when you do pursue it, older woman type like I was, it's easier. I wouldn't have wanted that kind of pressure on me when I had all those little kids. That would have taken away from the enjoyment I had as a mother.
You were 27 and you had 5 kids, right?
Yes. I never really intended to work, because back in the 60s, women, if they went to college, they graduated from college, and often they would get married the day after their graduation. That was common back then. And so I did get married, and like a good Catholic girl who wanted to have a lot of babies, I had 5 babies in 7 years. And the husband at that time, my ex-husband, who has since passed away, he took a job traveling. And then after about 6 or 7 years, he really got tired of that traveling. We were transferred out here from Chicago to California, and he got into a bank training program. And I was then 6 months pregnant with the 5th one. And we had a real financial crisis because he went on a bank training type salary and had a big crash in income. So I had to go to work. And I chose real estate because you could do it freelance type. In other words, I didn't want a 9-to-5 job. Really didn't.
Right. And I do remember you talking about It wasn't quite what you pictured. You thought, oh, this is going to be easy
Oh, yeah.
and very
Wow.
flexible. It was an eye opener, but you still became so successful.
I door knocked back in the day. We used to door knock, and I door knocked 6 months pregnant. I would take the other kids along in a stroller, and you'd go up to the door, and I'd say, "Hi, I'm Danielle Kennedy from Mission Viejo Realty. And if you ever think about moving, I hope you'll maybe think about me." And it was a very simple, I didn't say, "Hey, I've got a buyer for your house." It got, a lot of people got very techniquey, and that wasn't my style. My style was, I'm also in the neighborhood. I love homes. I would do a great job for you. And that's how it started, door to door. And the next thing, within the next 5 years, I was selling 100 resale homes a year.
And that's phenomenal.
Yeah, and they were $30,000 and $40,000 houses, and the commissions weren't hundreds of thousands of dollars, and it really helped us out. But it was also, I look back and I think, how did I do that? Because raising the family and holding the long telephone with the cord in the kitchen and stirring the spaghetti and changing a diaper, and oh yes, I have a showing. I'll bring someone to your house at 2:00 this afternoon. Not getting a lot of sleep.
You have a tremendous work ethic, obviously, but you always are so positive, really genuinely positive. And for you listening, she's the real deal. So I can see why people were attracted to that. And I'm not sure how you transitioned into speaking. Well, you are and were. Okay, go ahead.
That's a great question, because how did I transition to speaking? That desire that I grew up with when I was in grade school and high school and college, went 2 years to college before I dropped out and got married, and then went back later in my 50s and got my degrees. But that desire to be an actor was always there, because I was in the plays in grade school. In high school, I went to an all-girl Catholic high school. We did King and I and The Crucible, and I auditioned, and I did all the plays. And when I got to college, the same way. But it was always there. And as time went on and I sold more and more houses, I had a desire to at least speak about it, because I was an oddity back then. People don't realize it, but when I got into real estate, it was a highly male-dominated field. A woman going on caravans 6 months pregnant. They'd all meet in a restaurant, and then everybody'd go out and look at houses together. They were all men, and they were like, "Why don't you go home and have your baby?" You talk about, oh, wow, I don't even want to go there. So that was a big deal, a woman in that particular era. Her in the job market and in the real estate market was like a social experiment. It really was. As time went on, because I always loved to write too, I said, you know what? I'm going to write a book about how I sell houses, how I communicate, because there were all these very techniquey things going on, which I didn't really practice any of that. And so I wrote a book about how to list and sell real estate that was very appealing to a lot of people who were all about just making a connection and word of mouth and doing a good job. And then that client telling another client. It was really much more, what's the word I'm looking for?
I don't know, the relationship
selling.
Yeah. And I wanted to point out one thing that you mentioned as I was researching you for this interview. You had a ton of referrals because you believe in service, genuinely taking care of the customer. And you said that when you got a referral and you would approach someone, you said, now I have a double responsibility. Because I want to make that person who referred me to you, I want to make them look really good. So I think that's just a really good peek into your attitude.
You've really done your homework, Danielle, because the double responsibility script is one of the most popular scripts that I wrote in the How to List and Sell book. I had tons of stuff like that, but that one was a winner. And
really
people
is.
loved it and they were like, wow. And I would carry through too. I'd have the people call them. And then it was a very strategic carrying out an accountability type of a relationship. And yeah, that is how I built my business, really. The double responsibility script was huge. So how did I get into speaking? So I wrote this book and it turned out to be huge. It was like 500 pages. And I got it self-published. And then I was lucky enough down the road to get it published by a real publisher, Prentice Hall, and other people took it up as time went on. And when it got sold, it sold over 1 million copies. It's still in print.
And I forgot to add that to your intro. There's too much about you, Danielle.
I actually wrote 7 books and broadened into the general speaking world. I did a book called Supernatural Selling, 7-Figure Selling, The Balancing Act Between Career and Family, got into all kinds of stuff like that in my writing. But one of the reasons I wrote that book was I wanted to start teaching. I wanted to start speaking. And I knew that it would give me credibility if I had a book. And the first place I went was the California Association of Realtors. They had big conventions. And I auditioned. I had to audition with about a 5-minute speech. My book was in print by then, and I started getting hired to do breakout sessions on how to list, how to sell, how to build a referral business. And that was great because all that acting stuff, all that juice was in there. And I used a lot of storytelling, Me Too type stuff. So women and men in the audience would go, oh, wow, yeah, I felt that way too. Wow, when I lost that listing, it took me 3 days to get over it. I was really sad. I was in grief. And people were connecting on a very personal level. And I used humor and everything I knew about my acting world from high school and from my wonderful sister Xavier, who was my acting coach in college. I applied in my speeches. And they weren't memorized. They were definitely laid out. But how I would lay out a speech is I'd say, okay, introduction in the audience. Pretend you're you're just a regular person in the audience coming out and stepping forward. Kitchen story about stirring spaghetti and listing 10 houses. And I would plot it out, story and then how to, story, how to, because I knew that it's very boring to do a 90-minute or an all-day speech, which is nothing but people's stories. No, the story has to have a point. And so a story is connected to a how-to, and it's got to be not just my story, but a story that could have happened to anybody in that audience. When you think about a great movie that you love or a great book, you see yourself in there. Oh yeah, gee, Reese Witherspoon did a great job as June in the Johnny Cash story, but what she went through in her relationship and her heartache and her pain, I've been down that road. And that's always the goal for an actor, a salesperson. I know how she feels. She
Right,
or he makes me feel. And then that connection happens.
That's a great point. You need a story and you need a point because we don't want to just listen to the how-tos like it's a textbook. And
Right.
as you point out, the story is what is memorable and what makes the audience member or the person who is the buyer makes the buyer feel connected. And yes, I feel that way too. So you really are brilliant at doing that. I've watched a lot of your speeches. And I like the fact that you say you've got a framework, but you don't memorize,
Right.
because I think that is so apparent when you are
Oh,
speaking
thank
from a script, which of course you do in the movies and the shows, but
That's
a
another
whole
story
different
we'll talk
ballgame,
about
right?
later. That's keeping that 80-year-old brain sharp, but
It's pretty darn sharp. And boy, in the next episode, we'll talk more about that. And you've got to check out her cred, the list of roles that you've played. But that is just great advice for salespeople, like you said, combining what in maybe it's a product or a service that you want to show the benefits of, but the story is what grabs people.
And here's a little side note, which I don't think I've shared with you. Another one of my jobs is I am a Kaiser care actor. Kaiser Hospital, Kaiser Health has a cadre of professional actors. There's 30 of us. And we go around and work with doctors year round on patient empathy, improving their patient communication skills based on intention, attention, acknowledgement, and appreciation. And I did one of these programs yesterday where, say, a patient has to wait in a waiting room for an hour, and by the time they get in with the doctor, they're furious. So I'll play an angry patient, or I'll play a patient who is sad because maybe she's just had a cancer diagnosis. And these doctors, they've got to get away from looking at their computers when the patient comes in and making that connection. They have to make that same connection. And sometimes they do it by telling a quick story. Say I come in and I'm having back pain. Maybe the doctor says I'm dealing a little bit now with something like that with my own mother. And here I really highly recommend this physical therapy. And so when they make themselves human as opposed to just the medical expert, the trust builds between the patient and the doctor. So I'm back to doing a lot of what I did in the sales world now in medicine. And I do that in between booking film and television.
So yeah, what do you do in your spare time? Have any? But that's a great point, because as a patient, it makes such a difference. They used to call it bedside manner, right? Some doctors, you can tell they really care and they want to know about you. And some are just, okay, here's the diagnosis, here's the prescription, be on your way. So many of these skills that you're talking about apply to sales, of course, and business owners. So many women are starting businesses, and even at older ages. And old, the definition of old. The definition of old that I've heard is 10 years older than however old you are. And I told you, I've been interviewing women who are 35 and 45, and they say, oh, I'm so much older now, and I'm just really seeing the changes. And
you're babies, ladies, you're babies.
You're babies. And I'm 65. I'm a toddler.
But that's the 65 is the new 55.
Yes, and I feel great thinking about retiring, and especially you're a great role model for that, because why would you ever want to retire from something that you love?
No, I hope that my health stays and strong so that I can work
till you drop
last breath. Seriously.
Yeah, and one thing I heard you talk about in one of your programs is how much you believe in health, physical health, activity. For all kinds of reasons. But I think that is a common theme that I hear from other really successful business people and speakers. Most of them do exercise and take care of their health because it gives you an energy that you can't get if you don't do that.
And if you do it from the time you're young, and I got good habits in that area because I was a competitive figure skater as a young woman, as a kid and a young woman, and took dance lessons and all that. And then all the way into the age I am now, I've always exercised. My husband and I and all the kids, we were real big aerobics people. When the aerobics, like the Jane Fonda era and the jazzercise, we all would go to class together. Sometimes I would do two-hour classes a day in the morning and night, and taught aerobics at NSA, National Speakers, taught it at those conventions, and always did it. Now I mostly walk. I'll walk 4 or 5 miles a day. Walking is everything. Everything.
You can do it anywhere. You don't need equipment. And if you're watching this and you saw me roll my eyes a little when you said you were a figure skater, it's because I'm like, what has this woman not done?
I'm not doing that much anymore.
I know, but you have always had this zest for life, this positivity. When you talk about when you're selling or when you're teaching, it's about the audience. You have this empathy naturally. You're just you are something special, Danielle, in a big way. I'm honored that you're on the
my head's going to blow up for the rest of the You're such a sweetheart.
That's good because you said you just landed another movie role and
I
we can't
did.
talk about it till the
I did.
next episode.
But we'll do
But
it.
I love these messages for the listener. Basic empathy, stories, taking care of yourself, being
Yes.
healthy. And if you don't have energy and you don't feel good, it's hard to spread the
That's
love.
key. Health is got to be number one. And tied in with that is sleep. People don't realize how much sleep is as important as exercise. I mean, if you're not getting enough sleep, ooh, that's bad.
And I think you made a comment about a lot of overweight people look at skinny people and say, what are they doing? One of them is sleep. I do know some of those hormones and things that are produced when you sleep that help you manage your weight and your appetite. But just like you said, I used to tell my daughter all the time, our daughter that you know very well,
Yeah.
I would always say, your body heals when you sleep. And
Absolutely. Absolutely, Kay. One of the other things, a big message for our listeners, which is wonderful, thank you so much for having me, is the whole idea of being resilient, the idea of bouncing back after failure. And that was pretty much a theme in I'm like a cat who's had 9 lives, right? In my other lives as a real estate agent, then a real estate teacher, then a real estate speaker, and then a general sales, general keynote speaker, that whole era. Also, all the writing, because when you're submitting books and you're going through the rejection with editors and so forth. And then, of course, when you get into acting, I thought I understood and knew rejection until I became an actor. And wow,
that's got to smack you around.
But you really have to be able to delete. As soon as, okay, I didn't get that sale. I didn't get that prospect. They went in another direction.
As Mark Victor Hansen said, he's one of the creators of the Chicken Soup series. And he says, next.
That's my word too.
Yeah. And I have an interesting story that I heard you tell. And you might be surprised that I caught onto this, but this, I think, is also in your genes because your grandfather, who was named Daniel, and you are named after him, had a horrible accident. He was working, I can't remember what you said his job was, something to do with power. What was his job?
He worked for the streetcar company in Chicago. Gosh, you are good, Kay Miller.
I'm good. See, Stan wants to hire you to help me. I'm already
I need to hire you to help me.
His hands were perspiring. Okay, so his hands were perspiring. So when he flipped a switch, he got electrocuted.
Yeah, with more volts of electricity than they give a man in the chair.
Okay, so right there.
Yeah, and he was sterilized and his body was burned. He lived 3 years after that. But his brain, and he still had a beautiful singing voice, all that, he was communicating. And he actually died the morning of my baptism. Yeah.
That gives me goosebumps. But another little detail of that story is that for 3 years he was in the hospital and the nurses said he was partially paralyzed and he was blind, and he would sit up in bed and sing an Irish lullaby that I think we've probably all heard, Tura Lura Lura. I can sing it, but I'm going to spare you. But
absolutely. And he had this poem and he always recited it. Smile and the world smiles with you. Weep and you weep alone. For the cheerful grin will get you in where the kicker is never known. You're getting to me on that one. I don't think I've said that poem for many years. And it's good that I say that now and remember that. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. I loved that story and the fact that you, again, are named after him, and he died on the day of your baptism. That you said you always felt connected to him, and what a wonderful person to be connected with. And yes, he's your guardian angel. And we have a saying in the Uncopyable philosophy, which if you're watching, you can see all our orange books behind us.
I saw this orange.
It's great. That's it.
Yes.
And it is being brilliant at the basics. And some of these things that you're talking about really aren't rocket science,
No,
but they can make or break your success.
I think too, this is a story that always really helped me. And at the age we're at now, we're seeing a lot of our friends have health issues, not necessarily just our older friends, but there's just a lot going on in the world, and there's a lot of anger, and with social media and all the divisiveness and everything that we've seen in the last 20 years or so. I think that I often try to go back to what am I grateful for today? Focusing, even when I walk, I'll say, okay, what are the 10 things that come to my mind this morning that I'm most grateful for? And I used to listen to Bishop Fulton J. Sheen. He was a Catholic bishop that had a lot of books, and he had a TV show in the 1950s called Life is Worth Living with a huge viewership, like millions when TVs first came out. And I heard him speak once in Anaheim, California, and he talked about the Greek word scallop, SKOLOP. And what that means in English is your burden, your cross, your weight. And he said, he looked out at the audience and he said, if I were to ask 10 of you to come up here now and lay down in front of all of us your scallops, the burden, the hardship, the suffering, whatever it is, lay it all out. And then all 10 of you stand back and you could see not only your scallop that you placed in front of you, but the other 9. If I were to say, now choose the one you want to carry, you'd go back to your own.
You wouldn't want to trade. That's like marriage. It's like you look around, who else's marriage would you want? Okay, I'll keep my own man.
No, I'm happy. I'll take exactly what I have here.
That has been another common theme with really successful women that I've talked to. And I think that a lot of us say, oh, yeah, we're grateful. When you really think of the grand scheme of things, we hit the lottery. Being born in the U.S., we're lucky. We are blessed. But to really go through and make that a conscious exercise, I don't think many people do that. And I have to say, I'm guilty of it too. I have a little 5-minute gratitude app. And how many days do I say, oh, I don't have time for that? I don't have time to list 3 things I'm grateful for. Of course I do. And that just changes your mindset, right?
It does. It does. Because we can all get Debbie Downer. We can all be, oh, poor me. Hey, I'm half Irish, half Italian. Both grandparents on both sides were immigrants, came into this country. So I love that I have those genes in me, but that's passion, that's anger, that's joy. I can roller coaster just like anybody else. And really one of the great things about exercise is you get those endorphins and you get it levels you off. I think it's great for that too, letting the steam off. So I'm like anybody else. I can get down and feel sorry for myself. And then I'm like, wait a minute here. Let's just go over right now. What's so-and-so going through? Oh no, they just had a diagnosis or what? Oh, what's this person? They've just lost their house. And then you start thinking, wow, and think about them and what they're going through. And it makes me realize that this thing I'm concentrating on, this little tiny pimple or whatever in my nature right now, or whatever's nagging at me or who's irritating me is really inconsequential.
Yeah,
it really is. Yep. So, but that's something you have to deal with when you're dealing with failure too, and resiliency. You have to think, well, maybe somebody else got that job or that part or that contract, whatever you want to call it, for a reason that you don't really know, that has a lot more value in the big picture than it would if you had gotten it. And maybe if you had gotten it, sometimes people say, be careful what you wish for. Because how many times have we really been disappointed or felt awful about something And then we look back 10 years later and go, ooh, did I dodge a bullet?
Danielle, we're going to close out this part of the interview, and I can't thank you enough for these not only great stories, wisdom, specific things that each of us can do to be not only more successful, but happier in life. And
Oh,
so thank you so much, Danielle.
my pleasure. Thank you, Kay.
Thanks for listening to this episode. See you next time, and always remember to be uncopyable.